I've got a very ambitious aim today. I would like to change the way you think about making your most important choices. All my life, I've seen how good judgment makes a difference between good and poor results. So, what we know is that we learn lots of things in life, lots of things. But, oddly, we don't ever learn about judgment. Now, this is extraordinary. If it's true that judgment makes a big difference to the quality of your choices, why aren't we helped on our way here? What I've done is seen what a difference it makes. And I've gone around, I've talked to a lot of people all over the world about this. I've read whatever I could find. I've used my own experience to see what the differences are. And what I want to do today is to share with you what I've found. But first, here's a cheerful picture. What are we looking at? The Titanic, absolutely. We know about the Titanic. 114 years after it sank, we're still talking about it. And why? Because 1,500 people died when the ship went down. It was a huge disaster by any standards. Okay, can we go back to say, why did 1,500 people die? Now, you might say, oh, well, it was cold, it was the North Atlantic, they would, wouldn't they? No. You'll notice, even in this picture, the water is flat calm. It took 2.5 hours to sink. Nobody should have died. So why did they? It's because in a meeting 3 years before this ship sailed, this man, J. Bruce Ismay, looked at the designs and said, those lifeboats are spoiling the view from the first-class cabin. So let's just not have them. Judgment really matters. And here's an example of why. Now, there are 4 reasons why I'm going to suggest it's a great idea to think about your judgment. Number 1, it's a lot less painful to make a good judgment than to learn only from your mistakes. Mistakes can be really painful. Secondly, in terms of the way we look at each other, we rely on each other's judgment. At work, at home, all the people we interact with. Judgment's an important quality for the people in our lives. We know things, but knowing is not enough. We need to know things in relation to a context. If you're a professional, your professionalism is about applying what you know in these circumstances. Professional judgment is the key of what professions do. Lastly, and I'll come back to this later, we need it in relation to AI. Now, you could say maybe AI will take away the need for human judgment. It won't. I'm going to argue that judgment becomes more important in a world of AI. All right. So what am I talking about here? We make lots of judgments. Every single day we make lots of judgment. What do I eat? Where do I go? What do I do? And so on. We don't think much about them. That's the big grey area there. A few we know are really important. The things with big risks, the things we've never done before. These are things where our judgment is crucial. Now, in between, we've also got a number of things where we've got a bit of a structure. We've got rules, but how do we interpret the rules? We're applying a formula to something, but what goes into the formula? We've got to make choices about our budget, but how do we choose between elements of our budget? We know we've done something before, but is the past really relevant to what we're about to do now? So judgment's important not just for the very big things, but also how we apply these within the frameworks that we've got. Okay, let's move on to geography. Top left-hand corner, Suez Canal. Bottom right-hand corner, Panama Canal. This man, Ferdinand de Lesseps, said he's going to build a Suez Canal a long time ago. People said, oh, you'll never do it. too ambitious, it'll all be a disaster. Well, he did. And people said, this is a miracle. It's fantastic. We've connected the Mediterranean and the Red Seas. Brilliant. So actually, people said, and no doubt he thought, well, actually, I'm pretty good at canals altogether. So he saw this Panama Isthmus, and he thought, well, I'll do the same thing there. But you'll notice there's a bit of a difference here in the Panama Canal. First of all, you'll notice there's some green there. So this isn't nice green, this is nasty green. Equatorial forest, lethal mosquitoes forest, that kind of thing. And also, there's a bit of a mountain range in between the two, so you've got to have locks. So he tried to apply the same techniques for the Suez Canal to the Panama Canal, and I'm afraid it all didn't end well. Eventually, somebody else built the canal. So this is just quite a little way to illustrate the fact. The fact that you've done something before doesn't mean to say it's necessarily going to be the same in a different context. As far as judgment is concerned, context is crucial. And that applies also when we have a rule of thumb. Let's just have a rule of thumb to decide something. Now, here are two exactly contradictory quotations, famous ones, all right? You can't have both in all circumstances. Clearly, you've got to have some in one and some in another. So we can't just even apply a general rule. We've got to think about, is it applicable right now? We like making lists. Lists are great. And you can decide, do I get a Starbucks? Do I get a Costa for my coffee? Who knows? Queue, how far away it is. Do I like the coffee? So on, that kind of stuff. Okay, that's a nice, simple list. Not much judgment involved there. You can make a bit of a list and decide, actually, that's fine, I'll do that. But even there, you'll notice, you say, well, is the quality of the coffee more important than the length of the queue? And so on. So you've got to think a bit carefully about that. So lists are good, but lists are not the answer, because even with lists, you've got to make judgments. And that applies also to this gentleman, Charles Darwin, famous 19th century for the evolution of the species. Okay, so he decides, is he going to get married? And since he's a scientist, he makes a list. For, against, all right? Lots of things for, nice to have somebody to come home to. Against, maybe she won't want to live in London, things like that. Anyway, we know about this because the list is available. You can look it up. And at the end of it, he says, marry. I'll marry, yes. Anyway, he was married for 40 years. He had 10 children, so something must have gone right there. So, if we look here at the question of the list, even he knew he couldn't just make a list of pros and cons. We can't really do that. So, let's go on to what we can do. This is what I mean by what I've been talking about, judgment. And it's about who we are, the combination of the kind of qualities we've got as individuals related to what we know about this particular thing that we're about to make a judgment about. What's our knowledge here? What's our experience? We've got lots of experience in some things, and suddenly you come and do something completely different, and your knowledge and experience isn't relevant to that. You need to know that. So judgment's the combination of those two. Fine. Now, how am I going to illustrate what judgment is? Let me take you around my daily bike ride in London, all right? I use these bikes every day. So, what do? I start off on my app looking at whether there's a bike available, where I'm going to find it, and is there a space when I arrive. Knowledge and experience is a key element here, and after a while I get to know very well what's going on. App's really important. Number 2, I cycle, and in London traffic, folks, you've got to be really aware of what's going on around you. So awareness is the second element of judgment. Third is trust. Do I think the app is accurate? There's going to be a bike there? Do I think that the bike is not going to break down or anything like that? I've been on some other bikes which have not been so reliable. So trust is a third element here of judgment. Number 4 are my feelings and beliefs. Now, I like cycling, so I prefer cycling if possible. But also I know that it's risky, and I need to be aware of the risks involved in that. So I am conscious of that. I don't want to be overconfident, just in case something goes wrong. Then there's the question, do I take the bike or do I walk today? That's a choice available at each time. And finally, there's the question, all right, I like cycling, but not in the rain. So if it's going to rain, I look up, and if it is, I don't take the bike. There you are. Simple. In each case, we've got one of these 6 elements of judgment involved in a simple bicycle ride. Now, life is more complicated than bicycle rides, but I am suggesting that these 6 elements are the elements you need to think about in making complex choices. There they are. It's a process, I suggest, not necessarily in that order. You need to go back sometimes to revisit some of the things that you've looked at before in the light of better information. So, when does this matter? I suggest it matters in all aspects of our lives. If we think about our family, the question of, who decides who goes, where we're going on holiday, the way we go on holiday, all those kinds of things, what happens to the children. There are a zillion things in the family we have to make complex choices about. In terms of our health, what do we eat, how much exercise we take, do we take any notice of a pain, do we go to the doctor, those kinds of things. Around our home, we're renting, do we decide to buy, what happens, what kind of house, what do we buy stuff for it, and so on. And finances, how much do you need to save? How much do you want to save? Where should you put your savings? For all of us, these are the kinds of things we have to do all the time. And I'm suggesting that this kind of approach, it doesn't have to take hours, it can take minutes or even seconds in some case, can help you to make these complicated choices. Now, the good news in life is that generally speaking, we get better at this. We get experience. People tell us things that are useful to us. We kind of find out about stuff that we can do and can't do. So on the whole, the line is up. But not always. Sometimes we get a bit overconfident. We think, actually, I'm pretty good at this, which is perhaps a bit of a danger signal sometimes. Also, we can get into habits. We can get a bit lazy, those kinds of things. And judgment always doesn't get better automatically. You've got to work at it over time. Now, I mentioned AI. Let me just spend a moment about this. With AI, you might think, here's a machine, it does everything for me. There's the algorithm, it's something else. It's an it out there. Well, folks, as we well know, it isn't. We as individuals, we interact for a start off 3 times every time we ask something of AI. Number 1, should I ask AI? And which kind of AI should I ask? Number 2, how do I ask the question? Those of you in the room who've been trained on asking questions know it's not just a question of, say, just typing in anything you feel like it. The machine will react to every single change you make in that and will answer differently. So it's no use. We need to know. We used to use our judgment about how we ask the question. And thirdly, at the end, there's the question, how do we interpret the answer? Because the screen is the answer. Up here is where we identify what it is the machine is telling us and how we react to that. So AI is not independent of us. Our judgment is involved in 3 very specific ways every time we interact with it. What we also are probably not aware of is human beings have been involved in training this machine, programming it, and looking at the quality of the data that is involved. And I'll just give you an example. Training data, which helps to give you the answer you'd like. That can be on basis of 100 instances or 100,000 instances. You don't know when you type something into the machine, but it really matters. So, again, humans are involved in AI. It's not just to say we just abrogated responsibility for it. So, my contention is that in a world of AI, it's going to be humans plus machines that actually are going to be the key here. I mean, people make this thing saying, is it going to be machines instead of human beings? No, it isn't, folks. It's going to be the two together. And we're all going to have to learn to work with AI as a normal part of our lives. Okay, so what does bad judgment look like? People not listening, people not learning, surrounding yourself with people who agree with you, being overconfident, ignoring the evidence, driven by your feelings, not by the facts. I mean, these are kind of... Now, feelings, you can have feelings, but you need to know about them. You can't simply say, well, it's all about feeling. You need the combination of the two. So, poor judgment of these kinds of things. And what does good judgment look like? I suggest it's back to my 6 points there. Looking at the relevance of our experience and knowledge. Being aware of what's going on around us. In a meeting, what's going on in a meeting? What's going on when we're talking to somebody? All that kind of awareness. Trust. Can we trust what we get from the web? Can we trust something that somebody's telling us? What are our feelings and beliefs? Do we understand these? If you're really angry, that's not a great moment to make an important choice. And in terms of delivery, can we actually do what we want to do? It's not just a question of wanting to do something. The question is, can you actually deliver it? So, the headlines. First of all, I'm suggesting judgment is a process. It's not just something that comes from somewhere or other. It's a process. Number 2, I'm suggesting it's context-specific. Every judgment you make is different to every other judgment. I mean, even if it looks exactly the same, perhaps a microsecond just thinking about, is this exactly the same, is worth doing. Thirdly, I'm suggesting it can be learned and improved over time. And we can work at it like everything else. And I do think, as a reward for all this, it increases the chances of getting what you want. That's really the incentive here. Okay, so remember then, when it really matters, good judgment could seriously improve your chances of getting what you want. Thank you very much.